Today is Saturday, August 20th. As students head back to the classroom this school year, they'll probably notice some changes. Research shows many students are struggling to catch up after 2 years of interruptions to their learning. And school districts in some states are having a tough time hiring enough teachers and keeping the ones they have from quitting. We'll speak with the president of one of the largest teachers' unions in the country about where and why the teacher shortage is happening and what can be done about it. But first, we're getting into the data about student learning. A new report shows kids will need to learn at a faster pace this year to catch up where they should be academically. That's based on math and reading scores from millions of elementary and middle school students across the United States. We're speaking with one of the report's authors, Dr. Karyn Lewis. She's the director of the Center for School and Student Progress at NWEA, a research-based nonprofit that creates assessment solutions to measure student growth and proficiency levels. She's breaking down the good and bad news from their report and what action parents and other trusted adults can take. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Karyn Lewis, thank you so much for coming on the Newsworthy.
Happy to be here.
So we know that based on data, students really struggled to learn when the pandemic disrupted traditional classrooms. Why did kids get so behind?
We really see that the largest impact was in the 2020-21 school year, when we know that was a severely disrupted year. In the spring of 2020, when schools initially shut down, schools had to scramble and figure out how to get instruction to kids when they weren't able to be in the school building physically in many cases. And that was a really challenging process. We just weren't equipped. Our system wasn't equipped to be able to deliver virtual instruction at scale. And for many kids, that continued through 2020-21. And even for the kids that were back in the building, we were still contending with all of the social and physical health consequences and the socioeconomic consequences. It was really a collective trauma. And I know many of us as adults can appreciate that we weren't performing at our best the last 2 years with all of the stresses and challenges. And we were seeing that simply trickle down to kids. They were impacted as well.
But there was some improvement during the most recent school year, right? What did you find that was positive?
The good news is that when we look at the kinds of gains students were making in this most recent school year, the kinds of score increases we see between fall and spring is pretty on par with what we see in a pre-pandemic year.
Okay, so you found students were improving at a typical pace, which is good, but they have a lot of catching up to do, right? So can you explain some of the more concerning findings in the report?
So even though students are making gains at an average pace, that is not going to be enough to get us out of the hole we found ourselves in these last 2 years. So we really need to see students growing at above average rates in order to really start to get some traction at making up those unfinished learning gaps that we consistently see. And the alarming news is that those gaps are even wider for the students that have been hardest hit by the pandemic in myriad ways. And those are students in high poverty schools, as well as students of color. And in particular, I mean Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous students. If we keep improving at the rate we've seen in this last school year, we still have a very long road to go. And based on our data, we're estimating that it's going to take the typical elementary school student about 3 years to get back to where they would have been.
When you say that it's going to take 3 years for an elementary school student to catch up or recover from the losses during that time, what does that look like in the classroom?
In the classroom, that looks like teachers really having an incredibly hard job to begin with and an exponentially harder job in this moment. Because the pandemic has hit kids unevenly, teachers are now having to cope with kids coming into their classroom that may be the same age, but they're at really varying levels of ability. And teachers are asked to be able to meet kids where they're at and provide them the instructional opportunities to get them caught back up. But that's going to look really different for kids that have been harder or less hard hit. So it is really a matter of attuning to individual student needs and giving them the resources and supports necessary to get them caught back up.
And what did the data show about older kids? How long it might take them to recover the math and reading skills that they lost out on during the last couple of years?
For middle school students in particular, we're looking at a 5+ year timeline. And for those older students, a 5+ year timeline would extend past the time some of them are even in the school system to begin with.
So for high school students, they're already off to college or to the workforce. So what do you recommend?
I think it's important for us to be able to think critically about how to lean in this moment and get students supported with some of those missed learning opportunities that they've been denied the last 2 years, and being really strategic about using data to understand what student needs are and then provide them supports and resources according to those needs to get them caught back up. So that's leaning into either math or reading skills, depending on where students have more challenges, and double dosing or adding additional opportunities for after-school programming and summer institutes to be able to match kids with the supports that they need.
And looking to this new school year, I know the so-called summer learning loss is a thing, even in the best of circumstances. So with that in mind, what do you think can be done to help students build on some of the positive momentum that you did see from last year?
I think many of those efforts are already underway, and we know more schools are engaging in summer programming for students and providing those opportunities. So it's my hope when we see kids return to the classroom in the fall and we resume testing again, we'll start to see some evidence of that hard work paying off, that we're getting kids connected to those learning opportunities that they've missed out on, and we'll start to see the impacts in terms of their math and reading achievement.
What's your takeaway specifically for parents? What can they do to help their own kids learn?
I think the best thing parents can do in this moment is be an advocate for their students and make sure that schools are providing those resources and doing it in an equitable way. So making sure that they're finding out about those opportunities and that they're being extended to all families in the community, and really being the best advocate they can be for their students, to making sure that they're taking advantage of every opportunity.
Do you have any information on what this has been like for children and students, less on the academic side, but on the emotional side of not maybe feeling caught up when they get back into the classroom?
I think that's a really key question, and our data doesn't speak to that. We can simply measure kids' math and reading skills, but I think we're starting to see some of the trickle-down effects of that, the deprivation, particularly in terms of social relationships. And I really wonder if that might explain why we're seeing more stagnation for middle school students who are in this part of their lives when their social relationships are so key and critical. And if it might have been particularly damaging for those students to have been denied those opportunities for so long, and it means it's just that much harder to re-engage in the school system and be an active participant.
Any final thought or takeaway about this?
I think it's the wrong time to take this kind of one-size-fits-all Band-Aid approach in education, because that will meet the needs of some students, but continue to leave those others that have already probably been less well-served behind. And I want us to be really critical and realize that if our goal is to get kids recovered to where they would have been absent a pandemic, that's returning to the kind of status quo we had before the onset of the pandemic. And we know our education system wasn't perfect prior to COVID. There were inequities that already existed back in 2019 before we ever said the words pandemic or coronavirus, and they've only widened over the last 2 years. So as we're setting goals for where we want to get kids back to, I think this is the moment to really think critically about the status of those inequities, and if we can learn some new lessons during this moment of how to adopt our best practices to really get kids and accelerate their learning so we can start to get some traction against those inequities.
To read the full report from NWEA, you can check out the link in our episode notes. Still ahead, a recent study found teachers are about twice as likely to feel stressed out about their jobs compared to adults in other industries. So the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten, will share why she believes we're seeing teachers in certain states leave the classroom and what can be done to fix the problem. But first, a quick break to thank our sponsors. The Newsworthy is brought to you by Indeed. So rarely do we do anything truly great or headline-worthy completely on our own. It's important to have great people around you, and in business, that means building a great team. Well, Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. I appreciate that there are tools and a proven system right there at your fingertips. For example, Indeed assessments can give you a window into how candidates will be on the job. US Indeed data found that on average, applicants who scored highly proficient or higher on the reliability assessment were nearly 8 times more likely to consistently attend work. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/newsworthy. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/newsworthy. Indeed.com/newsworthy. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by Rothy's. We all know that feeling of finding something you love, right? Kind of a new obsession. I know I've had that favorite show on Netflix or that go-to restaurant that I ordered from 3 times in 1 week. Well, Rothy's could be your new everyday shoe obsession. They already are for me and so many others. In fact, it's easy to see why millions of women wear Rothy's shoes every single day. Rothy's shoes give you right out of the box comfort, amazing styles and colors, and you can wash them. I love that I can slip them on for anything too, whether it's a walk around the block or heading to date night. They can be dressed up or down, and Rothy's offers a variety of styles that are great for summer and fall. Plus, you know that I love that everything Rothy's makes is better for the planet. They've repurposed millions of single-use plastic bottles into their signature thread that goes into every one of their products. So step up your shoes and accessories this summer and get ready to be asked, are those Rothy's? Plus, get $20 off your first purchase at rothys.com/newsworthy. That's ROTHYS, rothys.com/newsworthy. Okay, now to my conversation with Randi Weingarten. Randi Weingarten, thank you so much for coming on the Newsworthy.
It's my honor to be here.
So with the new school year starting, what is the situation right now with teacher shortages?
We basically have a perfect storm going on right now, and it's worse in some places, better in other places. A few days before school starts in Florida, to have still 8,000 to 9,000 vacancies, that's a real problem. You have huge vacancies that we've been calling out in Texas for a long time. You have almost 2,000 vacancies in West Virginia. In New York, the situation is better. The same is true in New Mexico. So it's a very mixed bag, but the shortage is worse than it's been in a long time, exacerbated by the political headwinds and the culture wars in places like Florida and Texas, exacerbated by the fear about gun violence, and exacerbated by the fact that, kids have come in with real needs, and teachers have been working harder than ever before, in the aftermath of COVID, and haven't gotten the changes in conditions that they really need to meet kids' needs.
So you talked about some of the reasons already. Let's talk about it a little bit more. Can you give us some of the most common reasons and explain what's going on and what's actually getting teachers to quit?
Teaching has become it's always been a stressful job, but it's really gotten harder and more stressful now. Rand Corporation and others, not just our own polling, showed that teachers are twice as likely to be stressed than other workers in the country. And so what is that about? That's about the fact that, we are facing the aftermath of the most unprecedented pandemic in modern era. And as a result, kids have come in last year with lots and lots and lots of needs. And teachers didn't have the tools, the time, the trust, the conditions to actually deal with them. So that's really stressed out parents, and that's really stressed out teachers. That's number one. Number two, you have lots of political headwinds. So the banning of books, the censoring of curriculum, and that kind of stuff is driving teachers out of the profession. And then you have all the normal issues, which is class sizes are too high. We don't have enough guidance counselors and nurses. We have too much paperwork and not enough time to really focus on kids' needs. And compensation is subpar. So just like everyone else in the country, when gas prices get too high, when housing costs get too high, when compensation is 20% less than it would be for similarly skilled work in the private sector or in other jobs, that's when you have the perfect storm.
And ultimately, what's the impact on student learning?
Teachers are going to do everything that they can do. But if you don't have enough teachers, you're going to see class sizes increase. If you don't have enough substitutes, you're going to see classes collapse into, one big class in the auditorium if you need a substitute. It's one of the reasons why Michelle Lujan Grisham in New Mexico, that governor, called in the National Guard to be substitutes. But this coming year, what she did was she worked with the legislature, so they changed the retirement rules to allow retired teachers to come back and be substitutes. So there are answers to these problems, but you have to have willing partners. You have to have people who are willing to problem solve.
So what do you think can be done to fix the problem of teacher shortages, both in the short and long term?
We pay teachers a competitive rate so that they can live in the communities in which they serve. Do something about student debt. Canceling student debt right now would be really, really, really helpful. Teachers' working conditions are kids' learning conditions. So when we do the kinds of things that are good for kids, that's going to keep teachers in a profession. Lower class sizes, which is what parents and teachers want. We focus on the basics, including reading and science, math. We have extracurricular activities for kids. Let's try to spend more time teaching kids and less time doing paperwork about it. Let's change the assessment process so it's about what kids need to know and be able to do. Every one of the solutions that I've just talked about, someone is doing that well somewhere else. We just have to make it to scale. We want to fix these problems. We want to have a good school year for our kids this year.
Well, thank you so much to our guests for sharing their expertise with us today. Follow them both on Twitter for more. And thank you for making the newsworthy part of your routine. If you liked this episode or learned something new, send it to a friend and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're new to the show, be sure to check out our regular weekday episodes where we get you updated on all the stories to know for the day in our 10-minute roundups. Thank you so much again for being here. We'll be back on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.